Record, but hi everybody. This is Kimmie of Chicks with Spiritual Gifts and the Homesick podcast. Here with my friend Lindsay, who's a reader for Chicks with Spiritual Gifts, and we work together doing intuitive readings and developing like educational materials, intuition development for everybody in the legacy of our friend Terry Tucker. So thanks for being with us today, and we're just going to have a casual conversation talking a little bit about experiences we had when we were younger that we now recognize were, I guess, otherworldly or
Yeah.
were really like encounters were spirit, and we just didn't realize until we got older and we understood the language.
Significance.
Yeah, the significance
The
of it.
significance, right? Like how it all connected and what it meant.
Yeah, it'll just be a nice little introduction. This is our first podcast for CSG, and so we thought we'd go back to the beginning. You're starting from right.
Yeah. No, that was a wonderful idea. I love it.
So I guess maybe I'll talk. You want me to talk a little bit, Linz, first about like
Sure.
I didn't
Yes.
really have like the classical. And did I say hi, Lindsay? I'm sorry. I don't know if I gave you enough time to say hello to everybody.
No, that's okay. This is Lindsay from Chicks with Spiritual Gifts. Kimmie's one of my good friends and coworkers, and we just thought it would be really cool to share with you guys all of this knowledge we were just kind of realizing about past when we were a child and just what it meant, and that we had a lot of messages given to us that we weren't even sure about then what they were, but now we can see them very clear that we wanted to share with you guys.
Yep. It's funny looking back on some of the when the portal was still so open because we were just brand new little babies.
Yeah, very open portals.
Yeah. So I just talked about this, my very first episode of Homesick. And the reason I ended up staying sort of in this as the seeker of chasing after like memories of home is because I have a very specific memory that I had. As people talk about having pre-birth memories, it's not quite pre-birth, but it's pretty close. I used to know how to, and I retained the ability to exit my body and go back home. But I was only allowed, like, I guess it was probably my Catholic training at the time because I was in Sunday school and all that. What I was seeing is very classical Catholic Jesus, playing at the golden steps of gold gates. And like, I mean, I glowed, like I had a white light that kind of glowed from my body, and I was still in my little kid form. And I would go to these steps and I would be playing on these steps with other little children. And we would just be playing, playing, playing. And that was a very common occurrence for me based on some things that were going on in my home. And it's no fault of my parents' own for traumas and things that they had going on. But I used to like to go back because I wasn't really enjoying where I was. I had that, and I was always able to, I just remember being able to collapse my energy down and exit my body. But that was probably the most, and then at one point, I was actually told it was the last time I could come, that they had been patient with me. And then they were like, this is the last time, this is your soul family, but you got this new family down here. And then I was held by the hand and brought back and then told, and I was never able to go back after that.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah. And then
I have goosebumps everywhere as you said that. I really like all the way up my legs. Wow.
And the memory of how to leave and go was wiped from me too. So it was almost like they took my ability to easily astral travel.
They couldn't stop you, so they were like, we're stripping you of this. You can't sit with us.
But other than that, like I hear other people tell stories about spirit guides and imaginary friends and things like that. And I don't really have those kinds of memories, but I know you shared with me you do. So, and we were going to talk about it here. So,
Yes. I I had friends when I was a child, and I'm just thinking back to it as we're talking about it a little bit earlier, but I had friends, definitely, but I felt like in some way I needed a better friend, like some sort of protector,
mm,
like people that were there with me no matter what. Like your friends weren't with you all the time, phone calls in person, at school. I really needed someone to just be there all the time. So I had George and Fred.
that's awesome.
No, I know George and Fred. I don't know if you ever actually. I don't know if you maybe remember this. Maybe Drop Dead Fred. Do you
I do
remember that
remember
movie?
that.
So I got the name Fred from him because I was like, this guy is the coolest. So I created him from that movie. And George was a businessman. He was a big businessman, heavy set, tall, in a business suit with a black tie and a white shirt. He was like the mature one of us all. I hung out with them. I like loved them. I would just talk to them. They were cool and I had their images in my mind that I could see and I knew what they looked like. So then I loved to watch the show Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Absolutely loved the witch shows. And Salem, the black cat, I always wanted a black cat because of that cat, as well as from the Charmed black cat, the show Charmed. I
Yeah.
wanted a black cat so bad. And at that time in my life, I didn't have a cat anymore. When my parents got divorced, when I was about 7, we had quite a few animals, like a couple dogs, a few cats. I had a rat named Basil, who I freaking loved. He was so cute. But yeah, when my parents split, it was really messy. So we didn't have any animals anymore. So I really wanted another animal. So I created my Salem imaginary cat. And he was cool too. Like, so I had my 3 imaginary beings with me and used them all the time and I just loved being with them. I like they were my besties and I remember I used to always wish because I really believed in wishes. I
Really?
would wish and wish that I would get a cat, like a real cat in person. And I kept wishing that all the time. And one day my mom walked through our apartment door with this teeny tiny kitty, teeny tiny, like palm of your hand small. And I looked at that cat and I was like, my wish came true. My wish came
Oh
true.
my
Like it was so cool. Like
uh
I will never forget believing like wishes do come true because that cat came in that house in my mom's hand and she had found him under a bush while she was working like doing landscaping and the mom left and took the other kittens and then left him there. He was tiny. He had his umbilical cord still. So my mom was like, I can't leave him here, you know? So she brought him home and he was our little miracle kitty. We had to bottle feed him. He survived. His name was Charlie Barley and he lived for 15 years with us. He was crazy, but I remember he was just nuts. We call him Charlie for Charlie in the bush because he would jump out and attack us like out of nowhere. But yeah, wishes come true. They really do. And imaginary friends have a big part of your life.
So you realized probably with the cat coming to your family, like that was your very first conscious manifestation experience.
Yep, totally. It was.
Mhm.
Yep.
Did you ever able to get like information from those imaginary friends? Like they were telling you about things maybe to demonstrate they were spirit guides or
You know, offhand, I know Salem the cat was wisdom. He
okay.
was I know he represents wisdom looking back. George was definitely the businessman. He was my business side. And Fred is the fun, goofy side, just like from the movie. So, yeah, I mean, specific information from them, like a sentence, I can't recall. I actually am now just remembering I would watch them because their interactions were really funny with each other. Because George was so serious. He was very serious, like pen and paper serious, and Fred was not. And so it was totally opposite personalities hanging out together. And then the cat would always be closer to me than them. I feel like they would stand further away from me, just like watching me and looking at me and just being his cat self, I guess. But he just had a lot of knowledge. I just knew that there was something about them all special. And I think they're saying like now, my guides are saying like now they were more for entertainment value.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was something for me. I guess actually now that you mentioned too, Kimmy, you had some things with your childhood that things weren't just great. Like you wanted to escape. So I guess in a lot of ways that was my escape because a
Mm,
lot was going on in my childhood too that wasn't happy.
yeah.
So I needed people with me all the time that had my back and loved me, which were them. So they made me laugh a lot and just knowing their personalities were also opposite, but yet you're all stuck together. Watching them was funny. Like so funny. It just
I would almost guess that they were probably like memories of the personalities of some of the guides you probably have. Like, I'm guessing you probably have like a spirit animal that's also feline
Yeah,
some way, you know?
that makes total sense. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like they were able the spirit guides came in as their personalities for me to envision them with me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally could see that.
for sure. Mine really didn't come through as people. The one experience I have, I used to spend a lot of time. I mean, I was a Gen X kid, so we spent a lot of time outside all day long until the
Mhm.
streetlights came on. And I had a weird thing about spiders. I would spend a lot of time studying them, watching them. Like, I knew where every spider was in the bush on my block. And it was like, I was just kind of like a tomboy. I had twigs in my hair. Like, I just knew them all. I used to like bring them little ants to eat. And I never really thought anything of it because like there was also a huge phobia. It was like a love-hate relationship. And then I kind of grew out of it as I got older and I just got scared of them. But enter in plant medicine work, and I one of the last journeys I had, these it's this experience with these spider beings coming, and I was like, I could be terrified of this or I can allow. And you can't really fight, you're just not supposed to fight ayahuasca or any of the medicines because it's going to win, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And it was this really strange feeling of these were my people and that they actually existed. And I know I've had people say, oh, you're on drugs, you're tripping balls, but you're also accessing other realms. So these beings were talking about how I have I'm part of their tribe and connected to them, and they've been watching over me and protecting me. So I kind of came out of that vision and stuff. And there was another vision I had in Aya where like a spider was actually protecting me, and I'd actually asked it to protect me. So it had a soul part.
Yeah.
In the Midwest, they have like those flat web spiders. That was the most common ones where they build the flat web in the bush. And
Okay.
I journeyed down and found my soul part in a beautiful, like childlike bedroom in the hole with the spider, and she was protecting me, like
Oh, wow.
my soul part. So it was like my innocence and my trust and a lot of things that felt really foreign and scary because I didn't feel like I kind of separated myself from that part of myself when I was little. And just had to grow up really fast. And again, I disclaimer, this is not talking bad about my parents. It's just they had a lot going on for themselves. I didn't know what to make out of all of it. I'm like, maybe this is just my imagination, right? But I talked to a friend of
Yeah.
mine who's been initiated into Santeria, which is and he that carries all the traditions and the knowledge from the West African tribes onto the Caribbean.
Uh-huh.
And I talked to him about it. And he's like, well, in our cosmology, there are these spider beings and these spider people that live between the earth and I guess God or the sun as a representation
Uh-huh.
of God, and they work between heaven and earth, and so they're the in between. and
Oh, wow.
and I was like, I wonder if those were my people. and I and that was like the most into like some kind of spiritual connection that I had as a little girl, to know the frequency and the resonation of that realm and
Yeah.
the spirit animal connection by playing with the spiders all the time, even though I was deathly afraid of them. Yes.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I feel like they're saying like your mind was wiped about that, like before that life you had with them. Because how you just explained that too, and I got goosebumps. I think you really were one of those as well. And it was like becoming a human, though your what mind was wiped of that, but you still have the reminder from your subconscious,
Yeah.
and then your friend is also your reminder too, because how often do you meet somebody that's like, oh yeah, we have these spider beaks in between that we use, like, and then they're real, like that we you
It's
don't meet people around the corner that just tell you that, like.
it's better to hear that, like, find it on Google right from the source.
They're gonna recommend like a mental institution. They're like, yeah, no, sorry, there's no spider beings right now, like.
Gonna exit you straight into this white jacket.
Oh yeah, that's destiny and they're still with you. I love that. That's so cool, actually. That's awesome.
But what's pretty cool about this share that we just did is it just shows how every single one of us, like spirit, is so connected to us when we're little because we're just so fresh out of leaving. I'm going to call it home, leaving home.
Yeah.
And then it shows itself in different ways to each of us to match
Mhm.
our personalities, or, like, I don't believe an imaginary friend was ever imaginary. That's why it's so important to encourage children to keep those connections and not to tell them. Oh, this is all in your head.
Yeah, because that's where it manifests from, and that's what's keeping it connected. So if you don't believe in that or any of that, then what are you going to believe in when you're older, when you really need the help from spirit? If you're told it's not real, it's not going to, you're going to have to do a lot more work as opposed to starting it young and then keeping it with you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to shut it down and then to restart it again. Takes a
I
lot
think
more effort.
when you can connect to those parts of you that had that trust and that innocence and that lack of fear and those, that's where we all probably as adults unfolding our intuition need to, that's the gateway.
Yeah, definitely. Is remembering and believing again.
Yeah.
Definitely. I know we were going to mention some Claire stuff too. I mean, just from what I was thinking about with the question you asked about my spirit guides being in the imaginary friend bodies and the cat, for me, I could see it in my mind what they looked like. I would pretend they were there looking physically. They're there, but I would see them more. So more clairvoyant for me with that. And claircognizance for sure. Knowing they're there, just gut knowing they're in the room. And then in my mind, seeing what they look like would be so clairvoyant and claircognizance for me were the two strong ones, I would say.
Yeah, I was just about to go there and ask you. I was thinking in my head, wow, I never realized that clairvoyance is probably your strongest and my strongest. I know Terry always taught everybody has a strongest with the way
Yeah.
they filter in their information. It's not always easy to have clairvoyance as everybody wants to be clairvoyant. I remember Terry teaching that and other people saying clairvoyance isn't always the easiest one to have,
I could
you know?
I could see that. And I think for me the aspect comes with now that we're talking about the childhood stuff, I saw a lot of ghosts when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and lived in a really haunted house. I saw a lot of bad stuff, like scary. I was terrified actually in that house now that I'm thinking back. It was well, when my parents it was when the house I grew up in until I was 7 until my parents got divorced, but yeah, from like 4 to 7, maybe 5 to 7, I like nighttime, I would just be laying in bed sweating and I would see a man by my door, this dark shadow figure. Sometimes I'd run into my parents' room and go sleep in there because I was so scared. Then when I'd shut my eyes, I remember I would see all these murder scenes. They were terrifying. So I'm trying to go to sleep, get this person standing outside of my room out of the way because it was right across from my parents. I could still see him even in my parents' room. It was terrifying. I would see these horrific murder scenes and other ghosts too. And one time, even one manipulated one of my animals, me and my sister and her boyfriend. So they were babysitting me while my parents went out for dinner, like a dinner date. And my dad had bought me this like good sized stuffed animal. It was probably like a foot and a half tall, maybe. It was a leopard with her cub sewn to her. So I remember it was sitting in the corner in the living room and I couldn't sleep again because I'm looking at remember I was looking up and there was this lady ghost and she was actually she didn't scare me, but it was scary to see her because she was all white and she had really long hair and a really long white gown and she was just floating around right above us. And my sister and her boyfriend were sleeping. I'm laying there just staring at this woman because she would not go away. She was just there and I didn't know what to do. And then I'm sitting there just freaking out, sweating like I always did when I saw these things and ghosts. And then I just started hearing this thump. And I was like, what is that? And it just was going like, and I was like, holy crap, what is that? So I sat up and I look over, and that animal that I had was in the corner and it
Uh-huh.
was going physically up and down, making that thump.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at it and I just laid back down. I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And shortly after that, my parents walked in the door and it stopped.
Huh.
And I remember I got up and ran to them, and I didn't tell anybody about any of that when I was a kid. None of it. Nope.
And now you're telling internet, interwebs all about it.
When I got yeah, I'm telling the internet all about it. I guess I never felt like I needed to I never felt comfortable saying this is what's happening. I knew it was happening. I didn't need an evaluation from another person or confirmation that it was happening. I guess I just knew it was happening and for some weird reason I thought it was normal. It didn't seem like felt like I knew what was happening, but how would like I didn't need anybody to, because I'm like, no, it's real. Like,
Yeah.
so but when I got older, probably I think when I was in high school, maybe my sister, she told me she saw ghosts too there. And she's like 8 years older than me. So she was like, yeah, that place was haunted for sure. So she saw stuff there too. And I didn't know. So later on in our life, we made that connection with it.
Where did you
But
guys live? Were you in Arizona?
yeah, we were in Old Town Scottsdale off
Oh,
of
interesting. Because
Hayden
it
and
doesn't have
Thomas.
that energy, you know what I mean? Like, when you grow up in the Midwest and there's houses that are really old, Arizona
Yeah.
doesn't have that, so
No, I have no idea how we got into that house, but it wasn't a great house with
apparently.
spirit wise. There was a lot in it right off of Hayden and Thomas. So,
Okay, Old Town area, huh?
yep.
So, pretty early on, Lindsay, she's a born medium.
Well, I was just gonna say, I guess that's what we were saying with the clairvoyance, though. I can see why that one can be one of the hardest ones
Oh,
to
yeah.
have because it wasn't fun as a child. Even Terry, I remember her saying that. Do you remember her talking about her clairvoyance? She was a kid and she was clairvoyant. She saw ghosts too all the time. And she shut it down because it was so terrifying. And I remember in class, she would talk about she was trying to unchisel it. She's like, I tell my little guides to go in there and try to keep chipping away. Like, I want to be clairvoyant again. But that's why her clairaudience was so strong. But she couldn't get back her clairvoyance after she shut it down so hard because she saw so much and was terrified of it.
Yeah, and she was I mean, she's a brilliant clairaudience. But with
Yeah.
clairvoyance, the last thing I was gonna touch on too, what's really interesting is you were having visuals outside of yourself. I call them open-eyed visuals. Mine are all within the screen of my third eye.
Yeah, that is so interesting, right?
So,
Using
like,
the
you can still be
same
clairvoyant
yeah.
without seeing anything outside of yourself.
Yeah. So it's how you see with the clairvoyance.
Mhm.
Totally different than us. Both of us like have completely opposite ways of using it, but we're using it.
Yeah. And I used to tell Terry all the time, if she was really wanting to bring the clairvoyance back, and she'd be like, Kimmy, how do you see it? How do you see it? And I go, sometimes, Terry, it's not like I'm seeing it. I told her that it would come through as what is it? The claircognizant, the feeling. I'd be
Yeah.
like, I feel like I'm staring at the ocean. So sometimes my clairvoyance would come through feeling I was near the mountains. And then, of course, I would picture the mountains because it would almost come in through that clair first and then enter my clairvoyant ability,
Yeah.
which was, I guess, maybe the way somebody that was blind would describe the way they feel when they're at the ocean. And then, I can only guess it's a little bit like that, and everything
Yeah.
coming through tactile.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. This is a great I'm so glad I got to talk with you on, our first CSG little
Yeah.
podcast and starting from the beginning, and is there anything you would like to add? But it was great talking to you today, Liz.
It was so fun. I loved this.
We got stories to tell.
Yeah, I mean, once you start telling them, I guess the moment comes and then they seem just more expansive. You remember more. All of a sudden, the energy just start flowing in and you're like, "Oh, wait, now it's really vivid." And I'm remembering and feeling that even what it was 25, 30 years ago.
Yep.
I love it. So cool. I'm so glad we got to do this too.
So we are the chicks, two chicks from Chicks with Spiritual Gifts, and I'm Kimmie, have my own podcast called Homesick, but we both offer intuitive readings and are available for services on our website. So thank you for being with us today, and we're going to say goodbye. So bye, everyone.
Yes, goodbye. Thank you for listening.